Sarah Martinez gripped the steering wheel tighter, as heavy snowflakes began covering her windshield faster than the wipers could clear them. She was 8 months pregnant and driving home from her doctor's appointment in the small mountain town of Pine Ridge, Colorado. The weather forecast had mentioned light snow, but this looked much worse than expected. Her 5-year-old son Tommy sat in the back seat, quietly playing with his toy truck. He had been so good during the long doctor's visit, and Sarah promised him they would stop for ice cream on the way home. Now she just wanted to get them both home safely before the storm got worse. The mountain road became increasingly difficult to see as the snow fell heavier. Sarah slowed down, trying to follow the yellow lines that were quickly disappearing under the white blanket. She had driven this route hundreds of times, but today everything looked different and scary. "Mommy, I can't see the trees anymore," Tommy said from the back seat, pressing his face against the window. The wind was howling now, and Sarah could feel her small car being pushed around by the strong gusts. Sarah tried to stay calm for Tommy's sake, but inside she was getting worried. The radio weather report crackled through the static, warning people to stay off the roads due to dangerous blizzard conditions. She wished she had left the doctor's office earlier, but there was no going back now. As they rounded a sharp curve in the mountain road, Sarah felt the car's tires lose grip on the icy pavement. She tried to steer gently, remembering what her husband had taught her about driving in snow, but the car began sliding sideways toward the steep embankment. "Hold on, Tommy," she called out as the car left the road completely. They tumbled down the snowy slope, the car rolling twice before finally stopping upright against a large pine tree. The engine made a terrible grinding noise for a few seconds, then went completely silent. Sarah's head was spinning and she could taste blood in her mouth. She quickly turned around to check on Tommy, who was crying but seemed okay in his car seat. Her hands shook as she tried to start the car, but nothing happened. They were stuck in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone signal and a blizzard getting worse by the minute. The temperature was dropping fast, and Sarah knew they needed to stay warm. She gathered all the blankets and coats she could find in the car, wrapping Tommy up first before covering herself. The baby in her belly was moving around a lot, probably scared from the accident. Hours passed slowly as the snow piled up around their car. Sarah tried honking the horn every few minutes, hoping someone might hear them, but the sound seemed to disappear into the howling wind. She sang songs to Tommy to keep him calm, even though she was terrified inside. Night was coming, and Sarah realized that no one knew where they were. Her husband was away on a business trip, and she hadn't told anyone about her late doctor's appointment. The snow was now covering their windows, making their small car feel like an igloo. Sarah held Tommy close and prayed that somehow, someone would find them before it was too late. 3 miles away, 12-year-old Emma Chen was looking out her bedroom window at the fierce snowstorm. She lived with her grandmother in a small cabin at the edge of the forest, and she loved watching the snow fall, but tonight felt different. The wind was making scary noises, and even their big German shepherd Max seemed restless. Emma's grandmother was in the kitchen making hot soup for dinner. They had lived in these mountains for Emma's whole life, and her grandmother had taught her to respect the power of winter storms. "Nature can be beautiful and dangerous at the same time," her grandmother always said. Max suddenly started barking and scratching at the front door. This was unusual because Max was normally a very calm dog, who only barked when something was really wrong. Emma called to her grandmother, "Nana, Max is acting strange. He keeps looking toward the forest and whining." Her grandmother came to look at Max, who was now pacing back and forth by the door. "He senses something out there," she said thoughtfully. "Mountain dogs like Max have special instincts. They can hear and smell things we cannot." Emma put her coat on and opened the door just a crack. Max immediately tried to push past her into the storm. The wind was so strong it almost knocked Emma over, but she could hear something faint in the distance. It sounded like a car horn, but that seemed impossible since no one would be driving in weather like this. "Nana, I think I hear a horn honking," Emma said, closing the door quickly to keep the warm air inside. Her grandmother listened carefully but couldn't hear anything over the howling wind. Max kept barking and scratching at the door. He would run to Emma, then back to the door as if he was trying to tell her something important. Emma had grown up with Max since she was a little girl, and she had learned to trust his instincts. "Something is wrong out there, Nana." "Max knows it," Emma said. Her grandmother looked worried. She knew that people sometimes got lost in these mountains during storms, and the nearest help was hours away. The power suddenly went out, leaving them in darkness except for the fireplace. Emma's grandmother found some candles and flashlights while Max continued his urgent barking. The sound of the wind was getting louder, and Emma could see through the window that the snow was piling up fast. "If someone is really out there, they won't survive the night in this cold," her grandmother said quietly. Emma felt scared but also determined. She had heard stories about mountain rescues, and she knew that sometimes regular people had to help each other survive. Max was now howling, a long, sad sound that made Emma's heart hurt. She had never seen him act like this before. It was as if he could sense that someone was in terrible danger and needed help right away. Emma made a decision that would change everything. "Nana, I think we need to follow Max. He's trying to tell us something important." Her grandmother looked at the terrible storm outside, and then at her brave granddaughter. She knew Emma was right, but she also knew how dangerous it would be to go out in the blizzard. The clock on the mantel showed it was already 8 o'clock at night. Time was running out for whoever might be trapped in the storm. Back in the buried car, Sarah was fighting to stay awake. She knew that falling asleep in the cold could be deadly, especially for her and her unborn baby. Tommy had dozed off in her arms, his small body warm against hers under the pile of blankets. The car windows were now completely covered with snow, making their space feel even smaller and more frightening. Sarah's pregnancy was making everything harder. She felt cramping in her stomach and worried that the stress and cold might hurt the baby. She tried to do the breathing exercises her doctor had taught her, but the fear made it difficult to stay calm. The car's interior was getting colder by the hour. Sarah could see her breath now, and she knew the situation was becoming desperate. She had stopped honking the horn to save the car's battery, but she wondered if anyone would ever find them in this remote location. Tommy woke up and started crying. "Mommy, I'm scared and I'm hungry," he whispered. Sarah's heart broke because she had nothing to give him except a half-empty water bottle and some crackers from her purse. She sang his favorite lullaby and told him stories about brave knights and dragons to keep his mind off their scary situation. Meanwhile, Emma was getting ready for the most dangerous thing she had ever done. Her grandmother helped her put on extra layers of warm clothes, waterproof boots, and a thick winter hat. Max was still barking urgently at the door, and Emma could feel his excitement and worry. "You stay close to Max at all times," her grandmother instructed. "If you get separated from him in this storm, you could both die. And if you don't find anyone in 30 minutes, you come straight back home." Emma nodded seriously. She understood how risky this was, but she also knew that if someone was really trapped out there, every minute counted. Her grandmother gave her a powerful flashlight, a thermos of hot soup, and some emergency blankets. The moment Emma opened the door, Max bolted into the storm. Emma had to run to keep up with him as he headed straight into the forest. The snow was falling so hard she could barely see 3 feet in front of her, and the wind was trying to push her backward with every step. Max seemed to know exactly where he was going. He would run ahead, then stop and wait for Emma to catch up, making sure she was still following him. His thick fur was quickly covered with snow, but he pressed forward with determination. Emma's face was stinging from the cold wind, and her fingers were already getting numb inside her gloves. She began to wonder if this was a terrible mistake. The forest looked completely different in the storm, and she wasn't even sure she could find her way back home. But Max kept leading her deeper into the woods, following a path that Emma couldn't see but that he seemed to know by instinct. Every few minutes Emma would call out, "Hello, is anyone there?" But her voice seemed tiny against the roaring wind. After what felt like forever but was probably only 15 minutes, Max suddenly stopped and started digging frantically in the snow. Emma shined her flashlight around and realized they were near the mountain road, though it was impossible to tell where the road ended and the forest began. Max was barking differently now, more excited and urgent. Emma moved closer to where he was digging and thought she saw something dark under the snow. Her heart started beating faster as she realized it might be the roof of a car. Emma's hands were shaking as she helped Max dig through the snow. Her flashlight beam revealed the dark blue roof of a car that was almost completely buried. She could barely believe they had actually found someone. Max was barking and wagging his tail, sensing that they were close to helping whoever was inside. "Hello? Hello, can you hear me?" Emma shouted as loudly as she could while banging on the car roof with her flashlight. At first there was no response, and Emma's heart sank. Maybe they were too late. Then she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, a woman's voice calling back, "Help us! Please help us! We're trapped in here!" Emma felt tears of relief freezing on her cheeks as she realized there were people alive inside the car. Inside the car, Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. After hours of hopelessness, someone had actually found them. Tommy woke up when he heard the voice outside, and for the first time since the accident, Sarah felt hope instead of fear. "We're going to get you out," Emma called through the snow. But as she looked at the situation, she realized this was going to be much harder than she had thought. The car was tilted at a strange angle and wedged against the tree, with snow packed all around it. Emma tried to clear snow away from the driver's side door, but it was packed too hard, and there was too much of it. Her small hands couldn't move it fast enough, and she was getting scared that she wouldn't be strong enough to help. Max seemed to understand the problem and started digging with his powerful paws, throwing snow in all directions. Together, they managed to clear enough snow so that Emma could see the car window. She shined her flashlight inside and saw a pregnant woman holding a little boy. "My name is Emma, and this is Max," she called to them. "Are you hurt? How long have you been here?" Sarah explained about the accident and how they had been trapped since the afternoon. Emma could hear how tired and scared Sarah sounded. "I'm going to help you, but first I need to go get my grandmother," Emma said. "She'll know what to do, and we'll need more help to get you out safely." Sarah felt panic rising in her chest at the thought of being left alone again. "Please don't leave us," Sarah begged. "What if you can't find us again in the storm?" Emma understood Sarah's fear, but she also knew she couldn't rescue them by herself. Emma made a smart decision. She took off her bright red scarf and tied it to the car's antenna so she could find the car again. She also left Max with Sarah and Tommy. "Max will stay here and keep you company," she told them. "He's very brave and he'll protect you until I get back." Max seemed to understand his job. He lay down in the snow next to the car door, his warm body helping to block some of the cold wind. His presence made Sarah and Tommy feel less alone and afraid. Emma started the dangerous journey back to her grandmother's cabin. Without Max to guide her, she had to rely on her own knowledge of the forest. The storm was getting worse, and several times she almost got lost. She used her flashlight to look for familiar landmarks, but everything was covered in snow. The trip back seemed to take forever. Emma was getting exhausted from fighting through the deep snow, and her feet were getting very cold. She kept thinking about the pregnant woman and little boy waiting in the buried car, and that gave her the strength to keep going. Finally, she saw the warm glow of her grandmother's cabin through the trees. She had never been so happy to see home in her entire life. Emma burst through the cabin door covered in snow and breathing heavily. Her grandmother rushed to help her out of her wet clothes while Emma quickly explained what she had found. "Nana, there's a pregnant woman and a little boy trapped in a car. They've been there since this afternoon, and they're going to freeze if we don't help them right now." Her grandmother's face became very serious. She had lived in these mountains long enough to know how dangerous this situation was. "Show me exactly where they are," she said, already reaching for her warmest coat and emergency supplies. Emma's grandmother was a retired nurse who had helped with mountain rescues before. She quickly gathered everything they might need: rope, more blankets, a shovel, hot drinks in thermoses, first aid supplies, and battery-powered lanterns. She also grabbed her cell phone, hoping they might get a signal closer to the road. "Emma, this is going to be very dangerous for all of us," her grandmother said seriously. "But those people will die tonight if we don't try to help them. Are you sure you can find them again in this storm?" Emma nodded with determination. She was scared, but she knew they had to try. Her grandmother loaded everything into a large backpack and grabbed cross-country skis from the garage. "These will help us move faster through the deep snow," she explained. The journey back to the trapped car was a nightmare. Even with skis, they had to fight against the wind and blowing snow every step of the way. Emma's grandmother followed behind her, trusting Emma to remember the way back to where Max was waiting. Emma was relieved when she spotted her red scarf still tied to the car's antenna. Max was exactly where she had left him, lying protectively next to the car. When he saw Emma and her grandmother approaching, he started barking with excitement. Sarah heard the barking and felt hope flooding through her tired body. "Tommy, wake up. The girl came back and she brought help." Tommy had been getting sleepier and colder, which Sarah knew was a very bad sign. Emma's grandmother immediately took charge of the rescue. She could see that the car door was completely blocked by packed snow, and the angle of the car made it impossible to open. "We're going to have to dig them out through the back window," she told Emma. Using the shovel in their hands, they worked together to clear snow away from the rear of the car. It was exhausting work, and the storm kept trying to fill in the holes they were digging. Max helped by using his strong paws to move snow, and his warm breath created small pockets of melted snow that made their work easier. After an hour of digging, they finally cleared enough space to reach the back window. Emma's grandmother used a small tool to carefully break the glass, making sure not to hurt anyone inside. Cool air rushed into the car, and Sarah felt the first fresh air she had breathed in hours. "Hello, I'm Mary Chen, and I'm a nurse," Emma's grandmother called through the broken window. "We're going to get you out of there, but I need to check if you're injured first." Sarah explained that she thought she and Tommy were okay, but she was worried about her baby. The stress and cold had been making her feel sick, and she had been having some cramping. Mary's nurse training kicked in as she carefully climbed partway into the car to examine Sarah. "Your baby's heartbeat sounds strong," Mary reassured her after listening with a small stethoscope she always carried. "But we need to get you somewhere warm very soon. The cold is dangerous for both you and the baby. The rescue was far from over. Getting a pregnant woman and a child out of the tilted, buried car was going to be the hardest part of all." Getting Sarah and Tommy out of the tilted car was like solving a dangerous puzzle. Mary had to figure out how to safely move a pregnant woman through a small back window while the car was stuck at an angle against a tree. One wrong move could cause the car to shift or hurt someone. "Tommy, you're going to come out first," Mary explained to the little boy. "Emma is going to help you, and Max is here to make sure you're safe." Tommy was scared, but he could see the warm glow of the lanterns outside, and he wanted to get out of the cold car. Emma reached through the window and carefully pulled Tommy toward her. He was small enough to fit through the opening, but he was also very cold and tired, which made him move slowly. Mary supported him from inside the car while Emma guided him safely out into the snow. Once Tommy was out, Emma immediately wrapped him in warm blankets and gave him small sips of hot soup from the thermos. Max lay down next to Tommy, sharing his body heat and making the little boy feel less scared. "You're very brave," Emma told Tommy, and he managed a small smile. Getting Sarah out was much more difficult. Her pregnant belly made it hard for her to move, and she was weak from being cold for so long. Mary had to be very careful not to let Sarah get stuck in the window or hurt herself climbing out. "Sarah, I need you to slowly turn around and back out, feet first," Mary instructed. "Emma and I will guide you and make sure you don't fall." It took several tries, and Sarah had to rest between attempts because the physical effort was exhausting in her condition. Finally, Sarah's feet appeared through the window, and Emma helped guide her legs while Mary supported her from inside. Inch by inch, Sarah backed out of the car until she was safely in the snow outside. She was shaking from cold and exhaustion, but she was free. Mary immediately wrapped Sarah in multiple blankets and checked her vital signs again. "The baby is still doing well, but we need to get you both somewhere warm immediately," she said. Sarah was so grateful she started crying, which made her tears freeze on her face. But their troubles were far from over. They were still miles from Mary's cabin. The storm was getting worse, and Sarah could barely walk. Tommy was getting sleepier, which Mary knew was a sign of dangerous cold exposure. "We can't carry them all the way back to the cabin in this storm," Mary told Emma quietly. "We need to find shelter closer to here, or we need to call for help." She tried her cell phone again, but there was still no signal in the remote location. Emma had an idea. "Nana, remember the old ranger station about half a mile from here? It might still have supplies, and it would be much closer than our cabin." Mary thought about it and realized Emma was right. The abandoned fire lookout station would provide much better shelter than trying to make the long journey home. They helped Sarah and Tommy get onto the cross-country skis, with Mary and Emma supporting them on both sides. Max led the way again, somehow knowing which direction to go even though he had never been to the ranger station before. The journey to the ranger station felt endless. Sarah was having trouble breathing and kept having to stop to rest. Tommy was so tired that Emma had to carry him part of the way. The snow was now falling so hard that they could barely see where they were going. Just when Emma thought they might not make it, Max started barking excitedly. Through the swirling snow, they could see the dark outline of a small wooden building. The old ranger station was still there, and it looked like their salvation. Mary used a tool to break the lock on the door, and they all stumbled inside. The building was cold and dusty, but it was dry and blocked the wind. More importantly, there was an old wood-burning stove and some emergency supplies left behind by the Forest Service. Emma quickly gathered old newspapers and dry wood while Mary got Sarah and Tommy settled on some old cots with all their blankets. Within minutes, they had a warm fire going that began to heat the small space. For the first time in hours, Sarah felt truly safe. The old ranger station slowly filled with warmth as the wood stove crackled to life. Sarah sat close to the fire, holding Tommy in her lap while Mary checked them both for signs of frostbite or other cold injuries. Emma found some old emergency rations and bottled water in a storage cabinet, which seemed like a feast after their terrifying experience. Max lay contentedly by the fire, finally able to rest after his heroic work in the storm. Emma petted his thick fur, which was still damp with melted snow. "You're the best dog in the whole world," she whispered to him, and his tail wagged weakly. As the night wore on, the storm finally began to calm down. Mary was able to get a weak cell phone signal from near the window, and she called the local emergency services to report their location. "We found them," she told the dispatcher. "Everyone is safe, but we need medical help for a pregnant woman who's been exposed to extreme cold." Sarah was feeling much better now that she was warm, but Mary wanted a doctor to check on her and the baby, to make sure there were no complications from their ordeal. Tommy had perked up after eating some warm food, and was now playing with a small toy car that Emma had found in her backpack. "Why did you come looking for us?" Sarah asked Emma as they waited for help to arrive. "You didn't even know we were there." Emma thought about it for a moment before answering. "Max knew you needed help, and I've learned to trust him. Besides, my grandmother always taught me that mountain people look out for each other." Sarah felt tears in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude instead of fear. She couldn't believe that a 12-year-old girl and her dog had risked their lives to save her and Tommy. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Emma smiled. "You don't need to thank us. We're just glad we found you in time." Mary nodded in agreement. "This is what neighbors do for each other, especially in the mountains where we depend on one another." As dawn broke, they could hear the sound of snowmobiles approaching the ranger station. The rescue team had arrived to take Sarah and Tommy to the hospital for a medical checkup. The paramedics were amazed when they heard the story of how a young girl and her dog had found the trapped family in the middle of a blizzard. "That dog should get a medal," one of the paramedics said as he checked Sarah's blood pressure. Max seemed to understand the praise and wagged his tail proudly. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that Sarah and her baby were healthy despite their frightening experience. Tommy was treated for mild cold exposure but recovered quickly. Sarah's husband flew home immediately when he heard what had happened, and he couldn't stop thanking Emma and Mary for saving his family. The local newspaper wrote a story about the rescue, calling Emma and Max heroes of the mountains. Emma was embarrassed by all the attention, but she was proud that she had been brave enough to help when people needed her. 3 months later, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She and her husband named the baby Emma in honor of the brave girl who had saved their lives. When they brought baby Emma to meet her namesake, Max was gentle and protective with the infant, as if he knew she was someone special. Sarah often thought about that terrible night in the snow, but now it felt like a miracle instead of a nightmare. She had learned that even in the darkest and most frightening moments, there are still good people in the world who will risk everything to help a stranger. And sometimes those heroes come in the form of a 12-year-old girl and her faithful dog, who listen to their hearts and refuse to ignore someone in need.